Liam Halligan is an economist. He's also author of the brilliant Substack When the Facts Change, and author of numerous books as well on, frankly, the state of our economy. And let's talk, Liam Halligan, about the Office for Budget Responsibility. A very good morning to you.
Morning, Julia. Good to be with you.
Thank you very much.
Our official fiscal watchdog.
Well, yeah, I mean, these are the people, we trust to tell us, whether the numbers add up and all of this. Now, for many, many years, I mean, you and I, we worked many years ago in the House of Commons together, the newspapers side by side. We've been told that mass immigration, the legal stuff, not the illegal stuff we've been talking about with the one in, one out policy, that is a boon to our economy. It's absolutely good. It raises GDP, it creates jobs, and it's going to be all part of our economic miracle. After, 20 plus years of mass uncontrolled immigration, it does appear our economy is still in the doldrums. This time, the Office of Budget Responsibility have basically said that unless the government gets to grips with this and cuts mass immigration, that it's unsustainable pressure on our public services, and the solution is to actually get workless Brits back into jobs rather than importing everybody from abroad. I mean, first of all, how surprised are you that the Office of Budget Responsibility has stated the sort of thing that people like me have been saying for 20 years?
I don't think they have a choice, because in the end, if they ignore what's completely obvious, then they lose all credibility. Yeah. Back in the day when we worked together in the House of Commons, Julia, as you say, in the late 90s, net immigration into the UK was between 50 and 100,000 every year. 100,000 would be a bold year. It was generally around 50,000. And I think it's all about a question of pace. Now, of course, we're getting net immigration above 500,000, above 750,000, above 1 million in recent years, which, of course...
Thanks, Boris.
Enormous pressure on public services, puts enormous pressure on our state, puts enormous pressure on our tax base, particularly when so many of the net immigrants are dependents, and we have increasing numbers, also, the OBR is correct, of Brits who aren't working as well. Look, I was listening to what you were saying to callers earlier this morning, and I think you're right. There has been a real change just in the last few months in the public mood towards a sense that immigration, which has been a massive part of British life, certainly since the Second World War, a long way before that. I'm a product of that wave of immigration from an Irish background. Grew up in an environment where almost all my mates were from immigrant backgrounds, and a very vibrant place it was, and we all contributed mightily to the economy. But the pace then was the pace what it was. We now have immigration that's 10, 20 times more.
But also crucially, that immigration was people, came from Ireland. Again, my grandmother came from Ireland, but they were English speaking. They assimilated. They became, joined the indigenous population. Even when we had, the Windrush generation, you're talking about people from the Caribbean who spoke English, largely shared the largely Christian beliefs of the British country as well. And again, on a tiny scale compared to what we've seen in recent years.
That's right, and that's why I think the OBR has had to change its tune, because even though at a certain pace, immigration really helps. You get vibrancy, you get labour. You don't get a fall in income per head, which is what we've been in a GDP per head recession for the last 2 or 3 years.
Explain that, look, because a lot of people. I know you're a trained economist, but we talk about GDP per capita. What is it? What does it all mean? Explain
GDP per head. What it means is, GDP is the size of the economy in a single year, gross domestic product. When we talk about economic growth, Julia, we're talking about the growth or otherwise of GDP, and we've barely been growing in recent years. The States, they're growing at 3.5%, right? We're growing at 0.3% if we're lucky. With the GDP has contracted in the last 2 months since Rachel Reeves's massive tax hikes have really kicked in since April. And GDP per capita, all that means is income, economic activity per head. And when GDP, the economy is growing only very slowly when it's growing at all, but the population is growing like Topsy, then the cake, there's less of the cake for each individual person. We have to be focusing on growth. And for me, the way to get growth isn't just to keep importing more people, many of whom will be unproductive because they're dependents. The way to get growth, I think, is to not keep raising taxes the way we
Yeah,
are.
but also to get our own people who aren't working back to work. We have an extraordinary number, particularly of young people, who are just already on the scrap heap of life, whether they're sort of unemployed or largely now claiming sickness benefits, who aren't sick. I'm sorry, they're not sick. If they were my child, they would not be too anxious to go to work on a Monday morning. Now, I completely accept some people do have mental health issues which aren't visible, and they are genuine issues. We'd be better off spending money giving them therapy, helping them, treating them, than we would be putting them on the scrap heap of life for the next 40, 50 years and paying for them that way. We need to get those people in work. And when people say, but I don't want to do this job, and employers say we can't get anyone to apply for this job, as I've always said, when you're hungry enough, you will be willing to do that job. There is no job that I think, other than, OnlyFans, not that anyone would want, I wouldn't make much money doing that. But there's no, then I would, if it's legal, work, I would, there's nothing I wouldn't do to put the food on the table for my family.
And I think this is what David Miles is getting at. So David Miles is one of the top 3 technocrats, if you like, at the OBR. These people don't speak out very often. They're not public figures, really, but they are in public life, and they're very important in public life. They set the parameters that allow the government to spend money or not spend money, frankly. Yeah. Because if the OBR says you're breaking your fiscal rules, love, to the Chancellor, then, it'll be politically impossible for her to do that. Financial markets will go haywire, and so on. So for someone like David Miles, who I've known for very many years, he's a very canny academic, a proper card-carrying academic economist. He's one of only 3 members, Julia, of the OBR's Budget Responsibility Committee. And for him to speak out in this way, he's written an essay that all of us are talking about and reporting, basically saying we can't rely on ever more migration. We can't rely on importing people for growth. We have to, as you've just argued, Julia, correctly in my view, get British people, indigenous people, people who are already living here, working, because that is the only way we are going to really fix our fiscal problems, fix our precarious finances, that and growth. And for him to say this before we go into this long, hot summer of speculation about what Rachel Reeves is going to do in her budget in October, November, she's expecting the OBR to say, hey, guess what? We're going to upgrade all our immigration assumptions. That's going to give you a lot more growth, a lot more, pretend money to play with in the future. Maybe you can even cut taxes. The OBR aren't going to say that to her. Yeah. They're just saying, no, time out, Chancellor. You actually have to do some difficult stuff here.
Yeah, absolutely. It's going to be really fascinating. But you say that the times are changing. We got the OBR saying this. So appreciate you joining us. As always, Liam Halligan is an economist, author of the Substack When the Facts Change. Tom Slater, listening to all of that, it is significant that we talked about it a bit earlier, the different bodies, the different people who are now sort of waking up to all this.
No, absolutely. And the OBR is an interesting one because this government in particular has put so much faith in it after the Liz Truss debacle, where the slight, wrongly in my view, but the refusal to seek an OBR assessment for the mini budget.
And they really, that's a really big shtick for them, isn't it?
Absolutely. They're obsessed with it. Yeah. And so when Rachel Reeves comes in, she empowers the OBR. She says that it's going to be a real kind of check on government and what it does. So for it to come out and basically shred 25 years of Labour Party orthodoxy where migration is concerned is amusing, but an indication of where the wind is blowing.
But can I say yet another problem though is that once again it's the Climate Change Committee, whether it's human rights lawyers or whoever it is, and now the Office of Budget Responsibility, completely unaccountable, unappointed, unelected people having the final say on government policy. Much better. I don't mind having a sort of independent body that supposedly checks these things. I think I trust the Institute of Fiscal Studies more. But again, all of these think tanks, they tend to be from a certain class of people who are largely pro-status quo. They were kind of, I'm going to say, to a man and a woman, they voted Remain. A lot of them, probably voted Lib Dem at the last election. You know what I mean? You know where these people's politics are. I doubt very much you could be an open Reform Party supporter, for instance, working in any of these organisations. And if you hand over that control, and then that kind of sets the parameters of debate and possible policy, you're much better off just giving show us all your workings out, and let opposition parties and the independent think tanks, let them criticise, and let the journalists see it as well, and let people like Liam Halligan, who knows is sodding economics, to give their assessment. I would much rather see that rather than we can't do anything because some unelected quango is saying we can't.
And unelected is the word. Alongside making sure we've got a broader public debate with as many people with different sets of expertise and views on these things as possible.
And different sets of interests.
Absolutely, but also it should involve the public. The public have been voting for lower immigration of one flavour or another for decades now, and they haven't been given
But that's it.
And that's what it should. The people should decide, and then the wonks and the experts should work out the best way to get to that outcome.
And then do what they're sodding told.
That's their job.
But it's like governments and policies always listen to their donors. They listen to big business. They listen to the CBI. Well, they're representing big business. Well, they're very happy to have mass immigration because it means they don't have to put their wages up. They're not necessarily representing the interests of taxpayers at that point, who are subsidising those wages with housing benefit and losing their own wage increase or losing their own jobs. Thank you very much indeed for that.